Again, thanks so much for joining us. Thank you, Sarah, for offering your insights into how to turn an interview into an offer. So whether you're looking for a job or an internship, we're confident that Sarah's presentation will be really valuable and timely in this new year. So let me just introduce quickly Sarah Levine Meyer, class of 2000. She's managing director for client partnerships at One North Interactive, where she drives teams and people towards growth and success. A former project manager, account manager, user experience strategist, digital consultant, and marketing strategist, Sarah is and always has been a team builder. With over 17 years of experience supporting marketing functions for large, complex global organizations, Sarah's experienced at understanding the landscape, personalities, dynamics, and goals of businesses, teams, departments, and individuals, and navigating through complexity to help lead them forward. Certainly, we have a lot of complexity in our lives right now. So without further ado, Sarah, thanks so much, and go ahead and take it away.
Sure, thank you. Thank you to each of you for joining tonight. I have pulled together a handful of things to share, and then there will be time at the end for us to talk through questions. I might ask you throughout the course of this if there are things that come to mind to share them in the chat type thing. We'll see how it goes. But the content that we're going to cover is really about taking an interview and translating it into an offer. I think it's probably appropriate to start off by saying that there's no silver bullet to this, but there's a lot you can do to increase your chances. And so that's what we're going to focus on tonight. These are the main points that I'm going to talk through. So picking a job that makes sense for you, preparing adequately, presenting yourself in a smart way, persuasively following up, and then some tips that are post-COVID relevant. I think I'll sort of talk about things from a COVID remote standpoint throughout this, but then I've got some specific things at the end as well. So the first, picking jobs that make sense for you. I've included a little quotation on each of these major categories. So he will win who knows when to fight and when not to fight. This is really about aiming in the right direction. So when you're applying for a job, what you're really ultimately trying to do in most situations, not every, you could be in a contract situation where you're looking for your next project or that type of thing. But if you're looking for a longer term job, then you're really looking to establish a long-term relationship. And so it's in your best interest to try and make sure that what you're choosing to focus on in terms of job pursuits is truly aligned to what you will be a good fit for and what will be a good fit for you. So this is a pretty basic one, but it is the fundamental starting point for translating that opportunity into success, meaning an actual job offer. Once you've decided what you're going to focus on in terms of applying, the next thing is really preparing for it. So I like this quote: by failing to prepare, you're preparing to fail. You want to make sure you have the ability to demonstrate basic things like having the skill set to do the job. That's pretty table stakes. Or that you can develop the skill set. I remember my job interview going into my first job. I came from Williston, and then I went to Bates College. I majored in rhetoric. And I was interviewing at this technology company that did all of these things that I had never done before. And in my job interview, I actually said to them that I don't know or have experience doing what you're talking about, but I'm confident the things that are involved, I can do. I can learn how to do them, and I can do. And so I think knowing that your skill set is either a match or that you can develop that skill set is one of the critical pieces. And then, figuring out how you're going to convey that. So I've got a handful of slides like this, and we'll certainly share this out afterwards. First, you want to do your research. You want to know who the business is, where they sit in the market, what are some of the things that they're facing as an organization. You want to look into who you're going to be interviewing with. So understand their roles and how it fits in. You want to spend time figuring out like what the story is for yourself and why they should have an interest in you. So you're sort of preparing a case that you want to make to sell yourself to those individuals that you're going to be talking to. Know ahead of time what those selling points are and what you want to communicate. So I've put some things in here like know why you're interviewing for the role, know what you can bring to the organization. So how do you relate your skills? So if you whether you're coming out of college or whether you've been in the job market for a number of years and you're moving positions, how do you relate your background and your skills to what that organization in this role is asking of you? Think about what they can expect of you as an employee. So as an individual, what are some of the things that you bring? Do you have a positive disposition? Are you a problem solver, a go-getter? Do you bring ambition, follow through? Like, what are those things that they can expect from you? And make sure you're conveying that. How you can grow, how your growth over time is going to add value to them. So, they're hiring you at a specific moment in time, but over time, the things that you're going to continue to do and the ways that you'll continue to grow are going to help them also. So help them see the long-term vision of having you in their relationships or in their organization, what that relationship is going to look like. And I also think the notion of culture, the impact you can have on their culture is something that isn't always, at the top of the list of questions, but it's a nice thing if you can infuse it in because every business is trying to figure out how to improve their culture, no matter what that culture is. And especially in a remote context, culture is really challenging to maintain and to develop and grow. And so that I think is a big dimension, though it's not a qualifier. It's just a nice to have. So in thinking about all of this, you want to come up with the stories, give anecdotes, give examples of ways that you've done the things that you want to convey, prepare in advance, practice, make sure that you've gone through how you would communicate this specific point. I think one of the things that is really, really helpful is to know what you want to make sure you tell someone before you go into the interview. I often give my candidates that I'm interviewing this sort of favor at the end where I ask them, is there anything else that you'd like me to know about you before we wrap this up? Because I want them to have a chance to tell me the things that we didn't get to organically in the conversation. I think you should be prepared to know what it is that you want to make sure that person knows about you before you get into the interview, and figure out a way, even if you're not given that lob of a question, figure out a way to make sure you communicate those things. This last piece, prepare your questions. So I did provide some example questions as sort of fodder for thought. Can you describe what you expect will be the day-to-day responsibilities of the role? How do you see this role or this team evolving? How will this role impact you? So you're talking to the interviewer and trying to understand the impact that this particular hire is going to have on their day-to-day life. I think that's always helpful when the person I'm interviewing acknowledges that this has an impact on me, and trying to figure out what that looks like and what that means and what it would mean to me is really, it demonstrates an understanding and a sort of intuition that I value. What are some of the things you need most out of this role? Similarly, sort of thinking about this role in the context of the person you're interviewing with. Expectations for the role in 6 months, in a year. If I'm in this role, what can I do to make your work better? So all of these are sort of in the context of demonstrating that you recognize that you're coming into this business to help that business. This isn't you serving yourself and trying to find a job. It's you finding a place where your skill set is going to better the environment that you're entering. Understanding the landscape, like who does this role work closely with? Oftentimes, if you ask that question early on in the interviews, if you're meeting with a handful of people, you'll understand contextually a little better how the people you meet later in the series of conversations fit in, and you might be able to bring some information to that conversation that you wouldn't otherwise have. Some of the challenge you expect the person in this role to face, understanding what they're up against. Is there anything we've discussed so far that you see in my background that gives you reason to question my fit for this role? I think this is a great question. So really opening up the opportunity to understand if there are hesitations so that you have a chance to address them. So if you don't give people the chance, if you don't actually hear the concerns or the things that they think are maybe not quite a match, then you don't have a chance to actually tell the story or explain why that isn't actually the case. So I really encourage you to figure out in your own voice, in your own way, how to ask a question that gets at what are the things that might actually be misaligned, or where do you see concerns, or is there anything that rises to the surface that you see might be might make it, a challenge to, for me to move forward or anything like that. Last couple ones, what qualities do most successful employees here in this role have? That's usually a helpful indicator for yourself, frankly, of whether or not this is a good fit. So you're not only interviewing as a candidate for the role, but you should also think of this as an interview for yourself to confirm that this is still a good fit. So going back to that first point, picking a job that's good for you. It's really smart to ask what the next steps in the process are, because you're going to kick yourself if you leave those interviews and you don't know the answer to that question, because you're just going to wonder. The last piece of preparing adequately is really just nailing the logistics. So figuring out how you'll get there, when you need to leave, printing copies of your resume, picking out your outfit, packing your bag, making sure you have business cards if that's a thing that makes sense for your role, getting a good night's sleep, sort of being prepared. All of that is relevant in a non-COVID world. We'll talk about some tips for virtual interviews as the last segment, but I do hope these are relevant, and they're sort of, maybe they're obvious, maybe they're not, but don't ignore them, right? I mean, be well rested and sort of know how you're going to get there. If you're in a city, know how long it's going to take you and leave extra time, that type of thing. Okay, so the third sort of dimension is presenting yourself in a smart way. By the end of the day, your intention should be clear. So this kind of goes back to my comment about knowing what you want to convey and ensuring that you get that all in while you're there. Some things to think about. You want to speak articulately. You want to figure out how to be yourself. And I think, this is an interesting bullet point, right? How do you figure out how to be yourself? Especially in a virtual context, but even in an interview context, you really want to show someone who they're going to be interacting with, who they're going to be spending the majority of their waking hours with, if this is someone you're going to be working directly with. So if you're nervous, if you're uncomfortable, I think everyone's going to be different, but learning for yourself what it requires for you to feel a little bit more at ease is going to be really important, because those nerves will translate. It's hard to overcome nerves, but it's also hard for someone else to overcome the experience of meeting someone who's nervous. So I think, to the extent that you can, if you're picking a job that is a really good fit for you, and you feel good about the way that you can make the case for yourself, and that you feel a strong level of confidence in your ability to do the job, hopefully that gives you enough sort of comfort to be in that seat, sitting across from someone or sitting on the screen with someone, and to show them who you actually are as a person in the way that you're talking and the way that you're conveying yourself. I think one of the challenges in a virtual context is we try and figure out how to make the virtual setting as physically, as similar to a physical context as we can. And so again, there's some tips a little bit later about how to do that. But I do think that the goal is to be as natural as you can be. If you're used to moving your hands, which I notice I do, right? Like, move your hands while you're talking. If you would typically take notes on paper while you're sitting in person with someone, have a notebook and a piece of paper ready for you to do the exact same thing over a virtual context. You do the things that are natural for you. let's see, show you've done your research. So this sort of goes back to the preparation. Now you want to demonstrate it. You've done the preparation, you want to show what you've learned. When you're asked questions, you want to illustrate your point with examples and anecdotes. So it is often a good sort of barometer to know that you're answering questions. The time it takes you to answer questions should take longer than it takes them to ask the question. And in theory, the best case scenario would be that the dialogue is sort of going back and forth, and your response draws them to ask another question about what you even asked, what you responded with. So you're giving them enough and interesting information that something in what you just said is also worthy of them following up and sort of digging into further. Hit all the points you prepared, so you know what you want to convey. Make sure you convey them. As you go through a series of interviews in a day, let's say it's in a day, or in a process, an interview process, build on what you've heard in the previous interviews. So if you learned from the first person about one of the challenges that the business is facing, talk about in another interview the ways that you see yourself contributing to addressing that challenge, for example. It'll not only demonstrate that you are listening, it'll demonstrate that you're processing things in a pretty real-time fashion, and it'll also give you an opportunity to share ways that you can help the business, which is what you're there to sort of convey effectively. I think this last one is a good sort of structure. So if you frame your questions by incorporating things you've heard. So I understand your role is focused on what your impression of the role is. What are some of the things you need most outside of this role? So instead of just asking the second part, you're continually reinforcing that you're digesting and you're sort of paying attention and you're incorporating that into the conversation. The questions that you ask really do, when I think about interviews, I think that the way that the interviewee is responding to the questions is almost just as valuable to me in helping to assess them as a candidate as the questions they ask. So having questions that you want to ask both from a general standpoint is good, but also thinking about, and this again goes back to the preparation, for each specific interviewer, and building on the things that you're learning along the way is really going to help in sort of the impression that you're establishing throughout the process. I really feel strongly about this tip. I think particularly when you're in person, though it's probably relevant in a virtual setting too. Treat the people who are coordinating, or the person who's coordinating the logistics of the interview, exceptionally well. This might just mean your disposition via email with the office coordinator who's setting up all of the Zoom meetings, or if you're meeting in person, it might mean the person who sort of greets you at the door and gets you water and hangs your coat and brings you to the conference room. But that person's impression of you is going to it will play a role, especially if it's negative. And if it's positive, I think that often also plays a role. So don't write off the dynamic and the experience that person has. So after the interview is over, you want to follow up in a persuasive way. The more informative your advertising, the more persuasive it'll be. So there are a couple things here. First of all, there used to be a time when a handwritten note would go a long way, and that time, frankly, is past. You want to send the note as quickly as possible. So send it over email, send it over LinkedIn, direct mail, send it over whatever vehicle you sort of have access to communicate to them, but do it quickly, because things happen, the regroups occur, people move on, but that email coming quickly after, it does make an impression. It makes an impression, and it can make an impression one way or another. So it's really important for those emails to be persuasive and personalized. The best case scenario is that you pull in specifics from the conversation with that specific interviewer. So you're not sending a group email, you're not sending it just to the person who you're coordinating with. If there's a recruiting coordinator and you only have their email address, send them a note for each person and say, could you please pass this on to so-and-so? Could you please pass this on to so-and-so? Talk about specific things you discussed, reinforce how those things align with how you align with what they've demonstrated they care about. So sort of make that case again in a concise way that is articulate. End with a nice closing and make sure you have no typos. The other thing I want to make sure is clear is that you should not expect someone to respond to this. Even if they're going to hire you, they're likely not going to respond to this email. So that is not a measure of your, how well you performed, your performance within the interview process, or your sort of relative status to other candidates. And again, send a note to each individual person you met with. Here's an example. So, hello, so-and-so. Thank you for taking the time to speak with me about the position name. I really enjoyed learning about or found it interesting that, and just anything. I liked learning about this, or I found it really interesting that it's clear that, and make an observation. So something that you didn't say, or maybe this is about like your ability to do something, or it's clear that, this role really something, my background in, remind them a little bit about yourself, positions me well to connect it back to that observation or that thing you learned or the thing that they need. Our conversation made me even more excited at the prospect of joining the business or the team as whatever the role is. I look forward to hearing from you. So this is an example, again, kind of find your voice and version of it. But these are the types of things you want to convey in a follow-up note. Okay, so the last is post-COVID tips. So one important key to success is self-confidence. An important key to self-confidence is preparations. This is kind of looping us back to the beginning. The first thing here is there are so many articles right now with tips for virtual interviewing, and you absolutely should read them, at least some of them. So I'm not gonna, sort of regurgitate everything that's sort of in the top of a Google search when you search for virtual interviewing, but I do want to call out some of the things that aren't necessarily in all those other articles, or that to me rise to the surface. Wear professional attire. I think that one, even if the job doesn't require professional attire and it's only casual, I think you're sort of showing up and you're demonstrating a great version of yourself. You want to look professional. You email your resume to the interviewer beforehand. So when someone's moving from meeting to meeting, but they're sitting at their computer, again, this goes back to that concept that we're trying to emulate the in-person context, but we're doing so over the computer. So if you were in person, you would probably come to that interview and hand them a resume. Whether they read it or not is up to them, but that's a sort of demonstration of professionalism and preparation and that type of thing. Email it to them right beforehand so they have it at the top of their inbox. That's a nice little touch. It's not necessary, but it's a sort of nice, thoughtful thing that probably will stand out because many people don't do it. From a logistics standpoint, it's best if you can adjust your browser window so that your interviewer's eye line falls just above or below your camera. This is tricky. Most camera setups, you're looking a little bit below the camera. I'm doing that now. But what you don't want is for where you're looking to be off camera or off to the side, or to cause you to be sort of looking over here and showing them the side of your face. Close other applications, go on do not disturb. I think considering how you're going to take notes, because you do want to learn and sort of absorb throughout the process. Some people don't take notes, but some people do. I think if, like I said earlier, if you're used to taking handwritten notes, then doing so during the interview, that's great. I think this is all about, setting yourself up to feel natural. Make sure you're comfortable, make sure you've thought about your backgrounds. That's a pretty typical one. But these are some of the things that kind of rise to the surface for me. I think when we talk when we open it up for questions shortly, I'd love to hear some of the things that, um, you know, are sort of what, if anything, if anyone has had remote interviews and experienced those, what you feel has worked or you feel has been maybe awkward, that type of thing. I did include some links to some of those articles that I think have some good tips for remote interviewing. So that's here as a resource. And I also included links if you're interviewing on Zoom or WebEx or Microsoft Teams. They have a way that you can actually test your video beforehand. So, in the spirit of preparation, making sure that you're well positioned, your lighting is good, you're comfortable with what's in the background, the angle is something you're happy with. Like you can do all of this beforehand for those specific programs. So, the kind of substance of this is preparation, being prepared and being yourself. If you're aiming in the right direction, you're prepared and you're sort of coming across genuinely and authentically, then, I think the right role will find a way to you and vice versa. So, focus on finding the right company that is aligned with your values and the right opportunity that's going to challenge you and give you an opportunity in your career, not just a job opportunity. If it doesn't work, there's probably a reason. And so the idea would be to learn from that interview process and keep moving forward because there are a lot of jobs out there. And it's really, it's probably a matter of aiming just as much as it might be a matter of preparation and presentation. So those were the things that I had pulled together to share as tips. I know there are a couple of questions that people sent along, and I also thought it might be interesting to pose a question to the group for folks who have interviewed for roles and didn't end up sort of receiving the opportunity to sort of take those roles forward. I'm curious what sort of observations or reflections you've had that have helped you or that you've taken into the next interviews that you've had. So maybe that's sort of a conversation starter, and we also have some questions that we can talk through as well, and we'll open the floor.
Great. Thanks so much, Sarah. I know if anyone has questions, it's feel free to just pop them in the chat. You don't have to type out your whole question. You could just say, I have a question. I know Hillary is on the call, and Hillary, I know you had a question that you submitted ahead of time. Do you want to unmute and ask that, or I can certainly ask it for you if need be?
I can ask it. I'm in my pajamas right now, so I'm not going to be on video. But I think you did a great presentation, Sarah. I really appreciate you sharing your expertise. And my question is really in regards to the whole nerves thing. I recognize that interviewing is really more natural and comfortable for some than others. For me, it's not something that is particularly comfortable for me. So I'm just wondering how to maybe address those nerves in the moment, or at the same time, if you're given a question that you don't know the answer to, or you don't have sort of a really good answer to, how you kind of redirect to kind of calm those nerves.
Yeah, those are great questions. So the first thing that I would say regarding nerves is that it is totally appropriate to be nervous in an interview. This is high stakes, right? You're trying to get, like I said in the beginning, you're entering a long-term relationship. You're trying to build something with another party and you want to get to know each other. There's a lot of pressure on that. Some people do a much better job than others managing that. And it's okay to be one of those people who doesn't do as well, sort of, getting into a more neutral state. What I would say to you is explain that. So come to the conversation and start off by saying, like, I have to admit, this conversation, this interview has me very nervous. But the reason is because I'm really excited about this opportunity. I think this is a great fit for me. I hope that through this conversation, you get a sense of that also. Like, my goal is to convey that to you, but I do apologize that because of the sort of significance and excitement that I'm bringing to this, like it is translating for me into some nerves. And you might see that, and you could say like, sometimes when I'm nervous, I tend to move my hands a lot or something. So like, please accept that that's the reason that's happening is because I am so excited and I think I am such a good fit. Like turn it into something that is relevant and sort of a little bit of a teaser for why you're a good candidate, not a fault that they could sort of dock you points for or whatever. Let's see, you have to remind me the second question.
Oh, thank you so much. That's really helpful. The second part was if they ask a question that you don't feel you have a really great answer for, if you don't have an answer for, how to kind of redirect.
Yeah. Okay. So this is a moment. I love when I hit a moment like this with a candidate, because I think the moments where you ask someone something they don't know the answer to is just as, if not more telling than the moments when you ask someone they do know the answer to, a question they do know the answer to. What I want to see in those moments, because whatever your job is, you're going to experience those situations where you don't know the answer. I want to see you navigate that moment in an elegant way. So that could translate to, that's a really good question. I will tell you that I don't have experience in that area, but the first thing I would do if that came up is I would research this and talk to so-and-so, types of people, and then I would come back to you. Or, I don't actually have any experience doing that, but I'm pretty sure what it sounds like it takes to do that is XYZ. And I'm already working on, learning things in that area. And so I think in time I could come back to you and I would be sort of well positioned to do that. Or, some version of, I don't know, but I know how to figure it out is what I want to hear in that, because you're not always going to know. That's a very normal, probably more typical scenario than you knowing the answer. I want confidence that you can figure it out, and I can sort of, I can have confidence that you're going to manage that moment more so than I care that you know the answer, frankly.
Thank you. That's so helpful. I appreciate it.
Of course. Good questions.
If folks have other questions, otherwise we do have some other questions that had come in before. But I just want to give folks here, if they have a question, an opportunity.
Oh, I have a question.
Sure, go ahead, Lauren.
Great presentation, Sarah. My question, I guess, is a little more specific to my current situation. I'm a college senior looking for a job after graduation, and a past employer just connected me to somebody who works at a company that I'm interested in working at. He connected us through email. He gave him my resume, but now I don't know what my next step should be. I'm thinking of trying to connect with him on LinkedIn and express my interest in working at his company through LinkedIn, just as another connection to that person. But yeah, I just wanted to hear your thoughts on that.
So is there a specific job that you've identified already, or you know the business and you're interested in the business generally?
I know the company's Columbia, and I would be interested in doing a sales job there, but I haven't done any further research about the specific job since it was just my past employer knew this guy at this job, and it was just like an overview. He knows I'm interested in sales, but I haven't done specific research yet.
And then is this person that you're connected to now in sales himself, or is he in a different?
Yes, he is.
He is. So then what I would say is, particularly because we're talking about sales and there's a little bit of tenacity required to be a successful salesperson, I would certainly LinkedIn, you can reach out and link to him, but I would send him an email since you have it. And I would suggest saying something to the effect of, hi, so-and-so, or I don't know if the email you got sent has both of you on it, or if you're
It did.
Okay, so then I would reply to that email. Thank you, so-and-so, for connecting us. Next line, like directed to the person, like, so-and-so, I'm glad that, we were connected. I would love to have an opportunity to talk with you even briefly about your experience at Columbia, talk to you about some of the things that I've sort of identified as what I'm looking for in a next role. And, would love it if you had any advice or guidance for me as I move things forward in my job pursuits following graduation this year. I think you want to ask him to be a guide or to give you some sort of guidance versus asking him to actually submit your name to his, a job application or something like that. I think people tend, in those contexts where someone's connecting you, there's a lot of willingness to have a conversation, to take that conversation. And typically I would expect that person shows a level of willingness to even pass you on to the next person. So if you can, in advance of that conversation, do a little research, see if there's any positions that are open that you're interested in, or see if there are any people that would be good for you to talk to. So maybe there's a hiring manager in the sales department, or a recruiter from a sales standpoint. If you can't find those people, I would ask him, how would you recommend I navigate trying to get into the sales organization within Columbia? Are there any people you can put me in touch with? Is there a place where I can go to look at open positions? But I would use him to try and help you find the next step. I wouldn't ask him to actually sort of submit you to the next step, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that does. Thank you so much. That's really helpful.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Questions from anyone else?
I don't have a question, but Lauren, when you were just talking about that, I remember having that conversation when I was a college senior, and my brother, who is also a graduate of Williston, he goes, after that guy passes you to the next person or has that conversation, send him a thank you by sending him a $5 Starbucks gift card in an email, because no one's expecting it. And that's how you're going to make a lasting impression. And I got 3 interviews after that. So just a small tip, if you wanted to use it, I'll share that secret with you, because it's been very successful for me. So
awesome. That's it. Especially for someone who's interested in sales, I feel like that's a great tip.
Great. So some of the other questions that had come in ahead of time, Sarah, would you, in terms of trying to balance the, what might grab an interviewer's attention more? Is it how much research and how much knowledge you have about the company, or is it being able to sort of answer questions in a timely manner? What's that, how much do you want to sort of show that you've done your research and that you're in the know versus trying to make sure that you're answering it?
Yeah, I mean, I think whatever you get through research is only the intentionally visible layer. So don't bank on the research to get you the job. The research is important to demonstrate you do your homework. You're a smart individual who can process that information and translate it to what's relevant in the context of this specific job opportunity. But I would say understanding how to answer those questions and what it is they're actually looking for in the role itself. Once you get into a business, you're going to learn a lot more about that organization than you ever will whatever you can find on the internet. And so I think the research is a good thing. And it's a critical dimension to, sort of demonstrating that you're prepared, but that is not the most important factor. I'm not saying don't do it, but I am saying that's not going to get you all the way.
Great. Okay. So Sarah, just out of curiosity, ballpark figure, how many people have you, interviewed / hired in the course of your career, do you think?
I don't know. I mean, many dozens. I don't know the answer to that. It's been sometimes it takes going through like 35 people just to fill a single role. It's, you know, it's a lot. When there are open roles, I feel like it's my full-time job. And when there aren't, I'm doing it for other roles that I'm not specifically hiring for. So many dozens is the best I can answer. It's been a lot of years.
So you shared sort of what one of your favorite questions are in terms of after the interview wrapping up, asking the person if there's anything else they'd like to know about you. What do you think is the best question that the person interviewing can ask the interviewer?
You know, something that is related to the conversations that have happened and that they've learned. You know, I think that there's nothing, putting things into context, there's nothing that beats demonstrating that you can put things into context and then translate it and apply it and do so in the context of a conversation. You know, that to me is like a very quick and easy way for me to think like that person's sharp, that person understands this world while only sharing a little bit of information with them. So I would say it's something that's contextually relevant and extended. So it's not just regurgitated, but you've actually like translated it and extended what you heard. That will always go farther for me than anything that you could put on a generic slide, which I recognize is what I did tonight. So that's my answer.
So similarly, is there an interview that stands out for you in terms of being either particularly fabulous or particularly horrible in terms of what you've seen?
I haven't thought about that question, but what immediately comes to mind is an interview with an individual who was just immensely cocky and, you know, sort of came into the interview sort of knowing that they were more senior and more experienced than the role and then me and the person I report to and all of this. And it would be our benefit to have them as part of our organization and a role that would report to me, right? Like this is how they're coming across to me. That stands out to me as someone who just, a few moments in and I was like, when can I end this discussion? I'm like, there's no chance I'm working with you. We are not a long-term fit. We're not even a 5 more minutes fit. So thank you.
Great. Questions from anyone else? Otherwise, I think we can wrap up. So Sarah, thank you for sharing your time, your expertise with us. Hopefully everyone now feels like they have a few more tools in their toolkit. And as a reminder, don't forget to check our alumni events page for upcoming virtual events. And again, the recording will be available on Williston Connects. So make sure you join and activate your profile on Williston Connects. So again, thank you, Sarah. Really, really appreciate it. And thank you, everyone, for taking the time out of your schedules to join us this evening.
Yeah, thank you. It was really nice to have you all here. So appreciate it.